Right, the recording has now started. Again, thank you for joining us, and I will now turn it over to today's presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Hence Jay, Estango, Anna Clough, Chehochipkados, Mado. I want to say thank you to all my colleagues for the beautiful opening and prayer and welcoming today to this third day of the session. And you have joined the Tribal State Relations to Support Juvenile Justice System Improvements panel. I'm privileged today to be here with my colleague Jacob Metoxen and many other representatives from Oklahoma and South Dakota and from our Tribal Youth Resource Center team. So I'm going to let Jacob introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Metoxen. I provide technical assistance for TYRC. Oneida from Wisconsin originally. Now I live in New Mexico, where I am an attorney practicing criminal law. I'm excited to help facilitate the discussion today and hear about all the collaboration from our panelists. I know we're going to hear some helpful strategies for increasing services we can provide to our youth. So thank you all again for being here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jacob. We can go to the next slide. So at the TYRC, we always believe in opening in a good way and connecting with each other, and we have such a large group of attendees, so we want to say a welcome to each of you and thank you for spending time with us today. And we wanted to think of an exercise to share briefly with each other some thoughts about collaboration. So Jacob is going to ask our question for the day, and we hope to get some responses back from all of you who are attending about collaboration.
Yeah, obviously the focus of our discussion today is collaboration, as Anna stated. So if possible, you can utilize the chat through your personal and professional experiences. Please feel free to provide what you believe in a few words are necessities to successful collaboration. And I'll go ahead and I'll start with honesty. I think being forthright can lead to overcoming obstacles and helping to build relationships, and being upfront with goals can also make collaboration more efficient. So if you could take some time to provide what you believe is necessary for collaboration, we'll go ahead and share some of those examples.
Thank you, Jacob. And one of my thoughts about successful collaboration was a unified goal. So the partnerships or those that are collaborating are all working towards a central or unified goal or outcome that's hoped for. And I see we're already getting some responses in the chat. So we have a mention of open mind, mutual respect, honesty, open environment, open to differences, reflective listening for understanding, input, a respect for culture and authenticity, education. These are all really great responses. Relaying information to each other to help all, being willing to have challenging conversations and not discussing things outside of meetings if they are not promoting the mission. So these are all really wonderful responses. Thank you so much to everyone for continuing to share. I hope that if you are sharing, just noting, you can select a message to all panelists and attendees or to just the panelists, but thank you all for sharing related to collaboration. We know that many of you attending today are most likely part of collaborations and have experience. And we're really excited to share and spend some time with our panelists today. Next slide. So today, the focus of our session is collaboration, and many of the things that you shared are components of the partnerships that will be shared by today's panelists. Today, we are going to be talking about the reasons and considerations for collaboration between states and tribes, And we are going to specifically focus on the impact of collaboration related to juvenile justice and delinquency prevention. We're wanting to learn about some practical approaches that our panelists and other communities have taken to support the development of tribal-state relationships in an effort to support youth. And we want to continue to consider the implications of referral and supportive processes through effective partnerships, including those that can support tribal youth in their communities. We are very grateful today to our panelists who are going to share more about their individual experience working in collaborative partnerships to support tribal youth. I want to share that collectively this group brings decades of experience working within tribal and non-tribal youth serving systems. Each member of our panel today is aware of and has navigated the intricacies of tribal state jurisdiction, as well as the day-to-day complexities of connecting youth to needed services. The members of our panel today have all demonstrated an ongoing commitment to contributing efforts toward better outcomes for youth and their families. We are very honored today to share this time with them and hope that each of our participants is encouraged by the conversation that we will be having today about tribal, state, and local collaboration. Next slide.
Yeah, we're lucky to have an all-star team here to provide their perspectives. And we'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Alisha and then just work our way down the list.
My name is Alisha Edelen. I'm the Assistant Director of Juvenile Services at the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
Hello, I'm Amber Loftis. I'm the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Coordinator for Choctaw Nation, and nice to be here.
Debra, are you available?
Yes, good morning. My name is Debra G. I am Chief Counsel with the Chickasaw Nation Legal Division in Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Debra. Next up, we have Janelle.
Good morning. I'm Janelle Bretten, and I serve as the Director of Strategic Planning and Engagement, as well as our Tribal Liaison with the Oklahoma Office of Juvenile Affairs. Happy to be here today.
Thank you, Janelle. Kheri Smith.
Good morning, I'm Kheri Smith. I work as a juvenile justice specialist in the counties of Bryan and Choctaw County for the state of Oklahoma, and I work for the Office of Juvenile Affairs.
Hi, Kheri. Thank you for being here. Tasha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tasha Friday. I'm Wichita, Kiowa, and Caddo. I am the Assistant Director of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. I also do independent work with tribes in this field and have joined my state advisory group unofficially. So welcome.
You won't go, Tasha. And last but not least, Bridget.
Good morning, all. Bridget, Coppersmith, South Dakota Department of Corrections, and I serve as the state's juvenile justice specialist.
Thank you all again for being here. We're looking forward to the conversation. Can we go ahead to the next slide, please?
So we wanted to introduce this topic with the reasons that we would want to collaborate. We know that tribal state collaboration, there are many reasons that we do that. It's for the benefit of communities. We may have federal or state mandates or other policies that require us to collaborate. It may be because of an initiative and we want to include others. We want to invite others to participate in the initiative or the program that we are trying to develop. Or it may be out of necessity because there are issues in the community that are extreme or circumstances that require the immediate attention of partners to address a community issue. And we know that because American Indian and Alaska Native youth are often overrepresented in the juvenile justice system, that it is critical that we continue to develop tribal, state, and local partnerships to address disparities or other issues that arise when we have tribal youth entering into the juvenile justice system. So especially important to continue these conversations and to highlight all of the good work that is occurring across the country related to tribal-state collaboration, especially that of those communities that are supporting tribal youth in delinquency reduction.
And another topic we wanted to discuss was, having these relationships built organically. So a number of states and tribes have working agreements to support services for youth in different areas like child welfare, education, health, safety, or other necessary program. And these methods of collaboration help overall discussions and have obviously historically led to accomplishing plenty of goals between jurisdictions. But at the same time, if you have an opportunity to build relationships organically, that collaboration could have more long-term value, and taking the initiative to build those relationships can lead to change, which is based on the passion we all have for helping our youth. And one person who can speak to these particular practices is Tasha Friday, who you all just met. She's going to provide some background on ways TYRC has been engaged in collaboration with the Center for Coordinated Assistance to help support communities in their efforts to establish partnerships. So can we go ahead to the next slide, please?
Thank you, Jacob. So in 2019, we did collaborate with the Center for Coordinated Assistance to be a part of the State Relations and Assistance Division conference. And so what I would like to say, and what I have been saying, is that this session is kind of the flip-flop of the session that we did with them. We were trying to cultivate work and relationships between tribes and state agencies. Some things that we really focused on were just strengthening and establishing those partnerships. In that session, we really looked at it more from a state perspective with, infusing tribal perspective. And here, I think we're going to look more from a tribal perspective in injecting the state perspective as well. Some things that came out of that, I think, is just really acknowledging that as Indigenous people, we are collaborators by nature. We build relationship and community by nature. And doing that authentically. I think some of you have alluded to that with the first question. Lots of those things that you said we brought to the conversation as well: mutual understanding and a definition of sovereignty. I think within Indigenous communities, we define sovereignty how we do, and then dealing with the state, really finding that common ground and understanding of what that respect and relationship looks like. And then next, we did talk about acknowledging the strained relationships and histories that exist between tribes and states, and acknowledging that and moving forward for the benefit of our youth from those relationships. So a lot of different types of topic areas came up. Again, the data sharing, having that information, the notification, which are all things that we'll continue to discuss in this session, but really thinking about how we can be good relatives as organizations to one another, and acknowledging the tri-plural citizenship that exists within Indigenous people, looking at citizens of their tribal nation, the state, and the federal government, and how that all works together. Next slide. Sorry, I'm getting caught here. So again, we're just looking at what we want to do as far as inclusion, voice, collaboration, and building those relationships, and then enhancing tribal nation and state agency relationships to promote the use of Title II funding. We did talk, and Kheri mentioned about the pass-through funding and how that can be adequately used. Later in this session, you'll hear how South Dakota really does a great job at that, and allocating those funds in a way that is mutually beneficial for the tribes. Next slide.
So in 2018, the Juvenile Justice Reform Act was passed, and there were several special provisions included in that act to support and address tribal youth in juvenile justice. And I believe that Kara covered many of those provisions just before our session, and so I won't rehash all of those, but we do have several resources about the tribal provisions. So if you're interested in learning more about each of those specific provisions, or if you would like to review the consultation that took place last fall, we are more than happy to connect you with those resources. But like Kara mentioned, there is a space now for inclusion on the state advisory groups for tribal representation, which I think is really beneficial and important moving forward. And I believe that that's a really positive change for the JJRA in 2018. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we wanted to spend most of our time today actually in dialogue with our panelists. Because I'm here in Oklahoma, I have the opportunity to work with many of our Oklahoma OJJDP tribal grantees and have the privilege also of having met several of the members of the Oklahoma Juvenile Justice Task Force. And so we were thinking of individuals or panelists who might want to participate on a tribal state collaboration session, and very fortunate to have willing participants who are going to share more today about their programs and about some of the activities that they have going on. And I'll first go ahead and go to Alisha and Amber, and we can go to the next slide. They are going to tell us more about the Chickasaw Choctaw Nation's Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court and how they are able to collaborate with the Office of Juvenile Affairs here in Oklahoma. So happy to have them here today sharing more about their program and the work that they're doing and the opportunities that they've had to collaborate and provide services for the youth in their community. And if we go to the next slide, that'll actually show a closer picture of where Alisha and Amber are joining us from.
Thank you, Anna. I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how our collaboration with the state first started. It started through the Native American Juvenile Justice Task Force, which consists of the five main tribes in Oklahoma. And then we had state legislators and the Office of Juvenile Affairs. And with that task force, House Bill 1834 was developed and established, making it where if a Native child came in contact with the Office of Juvenile Affairs, then they were to report that to their primary tribe of membership. After we started receiving those notifications from the state, we saw that there was a definite need for a program for our Choctaw youth. We applied for the Healing to Wellness grant in 2017. But before the grant, the Choctaw Nation didn't have any programs that were for those at-risk delinquent youth. So we thought it was a much needed program. We decided to run it as a program instead of the traditional court because at the time our juvenile codes were not up to date and our judicial system wasn't prepared to take on this task. When we applied for the grant, we knew that we wanted to collaborate with the Office of Juvenile Affairs. So basically we went to them directly and asked them to send us their diversion cases, those low risk, low level offenders. We wanted our program to be about protecting the sovereignty of our tribal youth by keeping those low risk level kids out of the state juvenile justice system. During our planning stages of our grant, we were able to bring our state partners with us to the strategic planning meeting in Albuquerque. I know that Kheri and Julie from our local OJA office got to attend that meeting. And I really don't think that that would have been possible if we didn't already have those partnerships in place prior to being awarded the grant. We were allowed a 2-year planning period to start seeing kids. However, we started about a year ahead of schedule. We started our program in Bryan County. That's where our Choctaw Nation headquarters is located. And then we ventured out to 3 other counties within our tribal jurisdiction. We like to keep the Office of Juvenile Affairs involved and up to date on the kids that they send to us. We include them in our steering committee meetings and participant graduations. I'm going to let Amber talk a little bit about the program in general.
Yes, our diversion program has 4 phases, and each phase is between 6 to 8 weeks long. And during that time, our participants do various activities such as apology letters, essays, community service, counseling, mental health services, education services, and we address drug testing and substance abuse services. Incentives are provided during each phase, and we get our participants connected with other Choctaw Nation programs and cultural services as well. We have a steering committee that consists of members from multiple departments of the Choctaw Nation and other outside providers such as the Office of Juvenile Affairs and Bryan County Youth Services. We gather to discuss each participant's progress, and we will make any changes or adjustments as needed. And upon completion of our program, there'll be a graduation ceremony held, and the youth is awarded a certificate of completion, and we'll send that referral back to the state, and they will take that to the DA for a dismissal of charges. We also have aftercare services that we provide to continue to support and have treatment for our youth as well.
I think we've received a total of 24 referrals, and we currently have a success rate of about 35%. We feel like our success rate is lower than expected due to COVID and not being able to see those kids face to face like we had planned. Our current grant ends in September. However, we are applying for it again and hope to continue this program and continue the partnership that we have with the state.
Anna, I believe you are muted.
Thank you. The other part of that collaboration that Alisha and Amber mentioned is Kheri Smith, and I'll have her share a little bit about her role and the way that she engages with your program.
Thank you, Anna. And I just want to say how honored I am to be here in this space and in this conversation. I want to talk to you a little bit about the referral process and then the working relationship that we have with the Juvenile Healing to Wellness program, and then ongoing engagement with the program. So our referral process, when we say referral, it can mean 2 things. We don't say charges or police report, or it comes in as a police referral. And we do an intake, and that intake collects information. As a state, we are looking to divert all youth, tribal and non-tribal youth, out of the court system. So we're looking at any way we can support the youth with resources and learning so that they can walk out the door stronger and better and not have to ever have an attorney or go before a judge. The Juvenile Healing to Wellness program was a great option for us to serve all tribal youth when they come in. We take that information and we refer it out. When we talk to the district attorneys about this program, we've never had any district attorney not be completely on board with offering tribal youth this opportunity if they meet criteria for this program. The next thing is to talk about is the working relationship. So we did get to go to the 2017 cohort strategic planning meeting, and we were honored to attend that meeting. We had a chance to go there and to hear your language and to experience your prayers with you, to eat with you and plan with you. And that experience meant a lot to me personally for my personal growth and understanding, but also to help me understand an entire population that was not my own. And I was honored to be there. Ongoing engagement. We do serve on the steering committee, which we love being a part of. We do check maybe every once or 2 months on our kids, and Amber is gracious enough to tell us how they're doing. We by no means are looking at their progress, or it's not a requirement. It's just something that Amber is willing to say, look, your youth is doing well and here's where they are. And we appreciate that communication. But probably the most meaningful part of this for me is to attend those graduation ceremonies where we get to see the progress that youth have made. We get to hear their testimony of how far they've come. We get to hear their parents' testimony about how much they've learned and how much they appreciate the program surrounding them and helping them through the process. We get to see tribal youth stronger at the end of this. And that is probably the most rewarding part of this collaboration, is to get to see tribal youth win.
Thank you, Kheri. And I was at that planning meeting when you all were all there together, and I was so happy to see county partners there with the tribal team. That was very refreshing to see that collaboration starting from the very beginning. So we're going to talk more about that as we move through the panel, but I will now invite Debra G from the Chickasaw Nation to talk about their efforts with the Juvenile Justice Task Force. And then we'll also engage with Janelle Bretten to talk about some of the broader policy and actions that have been taken to help start collaborations with tribes in sharing information and ensuring that youth are being referred to the communities that they're a part of. So Debra, I'll let you share more about the Chickasaw Nation and the efforts you've been involved in.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today and to share with you about the Chickasaw Nation and what efforts that we have been providing on the juvenile justice front. You see here a picture of the map of the Chickasaw Nation, and in fact, we just heard from the Choctaw Nation, which is right next to us on the right side of the map that you'll see. We are located in the south central portion of Oklahoma. We cover 13 counties and mainly rural counties. Our program is housed within our Office of Tribal Justice Administration. We have a new title or division name. So we provide both the prosecution and probation services for Native youth who are in those 13 counties. As Alisha had mentioned, we work collaboratively with the Office of Juvenile Affairs on the notification law that was passed by the state of Oklahoma. So we receive inquiries and notifications that come from OJA when they have Native youth in custody and they are needing information as to whether or not they're Chickasaw. So we provide that information to OJA. So we started pretty small, just started as a court even before it was a Chickasaw Nation District Court, with just a few Native youth. And I like the word organic that Jacob had mentioned, because it really was an organic growth of the program. So now we have a case that has dramatically affected and impacted the Chickasaw Nation. As many of you probably know, that McGirt versus Oklahoma case has transformed, the coverage or the scope of jurisdiction for the Muskogee Creek Nation, but more recently, the Chickasaw Nation. On March 11th of this year, just a few weeks ago, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals has issued a decision in the Bosse versus Oklahoma case, where that expansion of jurisdiction has expanded Indian country, and now the Chickasaw Nation Reservation encompasses the full 13 counties here. So if you look at the map here, prior to that decision, Indian country had a more narrow meaning. So now we are operating as prosecutors of Native juveniles who are charged with crimes within our reservation. We now serve as the prosecutors and probation services for the department. So this greatly expands our scope of what we do in this office. As I said, this happened 2.5 weeks ago, so there's a lot of changes that are still to be made. Fortunately, we have had these long-standing collaborations with the tribes, the 4 tribes, the Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, who spoke earlier, the Muskogee Creek Nation, and Seminole Nation. So our collaboration comes in the form of the Intertribal Council of the five tribes, which is here in Oklahoma. And our Juvenile Justice Committee has been formed for several years now, and we have added Oklahoma Office of Juvenile Affairs to our committee. So I think that foundation has greatly helped us. We're now, navigating these new waters as far as scope of prosecution services, probation services that Muskogee Creek Nation has had for a little while, but now we're seeing other tribes also having to kind of navigate, this new territory. So we have worked, closely with, like I said, OJA in terms of different types of access, and I think Janelle will probably expand on that more. I think also just learning from each other, just learning what other processes that are out there has helped us with what we do now. So I greatly appreciate all that that the other tribes and even tribes outside of the 5 tribes that have helped us along the way. I know that there's a lot that we still need to learn and a lot that we still need to be doing in terms of process and operations. And I look forward to working with the tribal nations and with the state and also state partners, as well as law enforcement agencies and district attorneys' offices. I think that those are also critical offices that we need to continue that communication and collaboration with. So thank you.
Thank you, Debra. And I think that's a great lead into Janelle. I'll have you expand more on your role as part of the Office of Juvenile Affairs and then that engagement with the Juvenile Justice Task Force and working with the different tribal nations.
Thank you and good morning. I'm so excited to be here and just listening to all this information being presented just really shows the important great work being done to serve Oklahoma youth and families the best way we can. I know Alisha talked about House Bill 1834, where OJA worked with state legislators, and through that Native American Juvenile Task Force to pass into state law required the notification of Native nations when citizen youth come into contact with our system. And in that process, what we did was developed a directory, which we update and of juvenile justice or contacts with each tribe that we're able to send those notifications to. And of course, the spirit of that law was, to have a collaborative effort to develop protective factors and reduce youth potential to reoffend or just prevent tribal youth coming into the system and get those culturally relevant services in the community, help stay in the community. So in that, in developing that directory, it really helped with starting to build those relationships. Relationship building is key here. We started having some meetings, annual meetings were developed. Of course, that was kind of put on hold by COVID. We need to reignite those, but those were really helpful in bringing those contacts together. in the process, and just making sure we sustain those relationships. And in addition, we also provided a national Native Nations contact directory to our staff, our intake staff statewide. Another thing we did was implement or reestablish a more meaningful network of tribal district liaisons. We have 7 districts across the state, and in each district we have at least one tribal liaison for that district that helps serve as a helpful support, help with prevention efforts, developing resources for diversion, and just a contact, a connection for that district and serving and best serving tribal youth. We also provide juvenile justice system education, and just again build those relationships across the state. I think that was something very significant with that Native notification statute, and helping us develop better relationships. Being a part of the Juvenile Justice Committee has been instrumental, has been incredibly significant in us, like I said, sustaining these relationships. And here more recently, in response and navigating to the McGirt decision, the McGirt ruling, we began to have more meetings, tribal juvenile justice committee meetings, and how we could better support, OJA could better support the tribes in navigating that response. And one of the things we talked about was access to our juvenile online tracking system, which is an incredible system. It's a statewide database with just about everything you would need to know about a youth in the juvenile justice system. Demographics, court-related information, treatment, placement, detention. You can just pretty much access anything you need to know in that database. And so what we have done is a training, and what we're looking at is providing access to a partial access to our juvenile online tracking system, at least at this time, to the 5 tribes. To better support them in accessing information on tribal youth that are coming into the system in response to McGirt. So we did a training, a juvenile online tracking training, JOLTS training for designated people from the tribes, and also did some form paperwork for them to sign, and created basically a relationship there for access to JOLTS. We also have developed an electronic means to transfer case information to the tribes that are McGirt related. One of the other things that another initiative that is happening now too, if I can share a little more about some other things happening. We have a training, effective practices for positive interactions with Oklahoma youth. Just briefly, that is a training. It's a racial and ethnic contact training, and we're providing that to staff and all juvenile justice stakeholders and law enforcement community partners to improve interaction and outcomes with youth who are minorities. It focuses on the role of patrol, school resource officer, child, serving agency professionals in helping to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities. And part of that training, it's an evidence-based training that was created in Connecticut, and it's going to be provided statewide, and its expanded curriculum includes cultural sensitivity to specific tribes, as well as adverse childhood experiences. The training meets the OJJDP, one of its core as well. So I wanted to share about that. That's an initiative going on right now. And we have tribal partners that are going through the training for trainers and also just attending the training statewide as we roll the training out. And so that's pretty exciting. And I just wanted to share that as well. I don't know if anybody has any more questions about the notification law or the partnerships. I would be happy to entertain any questions and further discussion on that.
Yeah, we'll bring up that notification statute language in a little bit later in the call. But thank you so much, Janelle. That's a lot of really great information. And I know just that working relationship that had begun years back now is contributing just to the continued work and support for youth. So there's not going to be gaps in services. There's going to just continue to be those very clear referral processes to support those youth who may be coming into contact with the system. So thank you very much. We're going to revisit with all of our Oklahoma panelists here in a minute, but I want to also bring in Tasha Friday and Bridget to talk about South Dakota. And they were actually in a session in the fall, in the Shrab session that Tasha mentioned earlier in her presentation. And she's going to talk a little bit about that work there that is going on in the state of South Dakota. And then Bridget can share some about her work with communities in the state that she's in.
Thank you, Anna. I just do want to make a couple of connections. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, I'm Wichita, Kiowa, and Caddo from Oklahoma. And so Oklahoma is the ancestral territory of the Wichita, or the Kitty Kitties people. Right now, I'm zooming in from Porcupine, South Dakota, so in the state here of the Lakota people. And as you look at this map, you can see that there are a variety of tribes here. Oklahoma is kind of unique in that the number of tribes that are there and the diversity of the tribes there. In South Dakota, while the tribes are different, there are so many similarities in values and histories, etc. So to that extent, I think that makes it a little bit easier when you're collaborating and trying to be culturally responsive. And Bridget's going to expand upon that. She does a really great job. The other thing I wanted to mention was that, Debra talked about the Intertribal Council, and I really like that model. They have always been welcoming, not only to the 5 tribes, but other tribes. So they're not only collaborating with the state, but with other tribes and being helpful in that way. So I think it's really important. And then with Choctaw Nation and Ms. Smith, they really exemplified that two-way street exchange of information, that true relationship building. And I think that's what we see here in South Dakota as well. Bridget is a great example of sincerity and learning and sharing resources and her dedication to youth. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is we're all looking for true allies who are dedicated to uplifting our youth. So Bridget, I would love for you to share kind of your experience. I think that was the most impactful part of our last session together, was your experience kind of getting into this and figuring it out. And I think that can be helpful for us to understand from the state side what that looks like and how we can support you as well.
Thank you so much, Tasha, and I'm happy to be back on another panel with you. I have had the honor of working with the 9 tribes of South Dakota through managing subgrants under OJJDP's Title II Formula Grants program. As mentioned before, we do have federal mandates to pass through funding. In South Dakota, we view this funding not as a limit or a hurdle, but as a reminder of a significant population in our state that needs to be served. We do not limit our pass-through to the required amount, but instead look to see that appropriate levels of funding are available to ensure work can be done to best serve our tribal youth. I have lived in South Dakota my entire life, but I've never worked with tribal youth or communities prior to this job. When preparing for my first on-site visit, I knew that it would be different from visiting other government agencies, but I was unsure of what to expect. Honestly, I was nervous, and I didn't want to offend or be disrespectful to anyone due to not knowing much about their culture or traditions. I approached my contacts with the tribe about my concerns and asked to be educated if I acted in any way that could be perceived as disrespectful, as an interrupting or not actively listening. They were open to helping me and appreciated my ability to admit that I did need help and that I was open to learning. I found during my site visit a community that was working to best serve their youth, and that these youth were more than numbers and cases, but they were family and the future of the tribe. In my role with grant management, it could be easy to distance myself from youth actually being served. I quickly learned the importance of stories and hearing about the youth. We would cover grant specifics and requirements as required with all my visits, but we would also discuss the stories and the struggles youth were having. And as Kheri mentioned, we would share experiences, and those experiences really impacted my ability to work and see these youth as the purpose of my job, not just figuring out numbers and deadlines. I was able to be part of funding multiple juvenile justice programs, including probation officers, school-based prevention, youth services and tribal detention centers, and after-school programs for delinquent and at-risk youth. My work with tribes has grown significantly in my 10 years in state government. I have learned that I needed to go to reservations open and willing to learn. I was not and am not the expert regarding their youth, history, or traditions. I'm a partner that can share my knowledge regarding programs and opportunities and how they might fit their needs. Some of my greatest honors have included sharing meals and learning to bead with a juvenile after-school program. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to continue to learn from the tribes of my state, and I look forward to continuing to work with them, not as a requirement of a grant, but an opportunity to best serve youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. Again, I think that's really indicative of the type of true relationship building that we're all seeking to find and be good relatives to each other. And you can just hear in your story how dedicated and open your heart is. I've talked on several of our sessions about our efforts as Indigenous people to try to get a seat at the table, and that we need to really think about inviting people to our table. And so I am so glad that you've taken an opportunity to join us at our table, literally, and share a meal with us and hear us, see us for who we are and what's important to us, and how you can utilize those resources to assist us. I think, these kinds of things don't happen in a vacuum, and stepping out of our silos on both sides is super important. And then also, I did want to touch back on what Janelle talked about as far as information sharing and the database sharing. I think too, as tribal communities, we can do a better job of capturing our own information, telling our own stories, and sharing that back with the state. So once they come, we're notified and they come into our juvenile healing to wellness system and programs, how are we tracking that information and sharing that back with our state partners and our federal partners to show what the outcomes are and where we could do better and where we're doing really well. So thank you again, Bridget. Anna?
Thank you so much. And I had the opportunity to listen in on those fall sessions and wanted to welcome Bridget to join this panel just to talk about building those relationships and being a part of the community, coming into the community, being a part of the conversations, and really taking the time to understand the issues that are occurring and trying to work towards better outcomes for everyone. So thank you again, Bridget, for sharing. And we're going to go ahead and move into some questions. We've had the opportunity now to get acquainted with all of our panelists and hear about the collaborations that are taking place between the community initiative and the state partnerships. And I believe that Jacob is going to introduce our first question to our panelists and have them share a little bit more.
Yep, thank you, Anna. And I guess we'll start with Alisha, Amber, and Kheri, whoever wants to answer this more general question. So you guys shared specific benefits of collaboration you've experienced over the years in trying to build up your services to the youth and collaborating with the neighboring jurisdictions. I'm just wondering if there are other benefits or outcomes you've seen in the collaboration that you were a part of besides the ones you discussed earlier.
Yeah, I think some of the benefits in general are just, it's given the state and the tribe just the options to best serve the youth in our community. Just working together, the tribe can provide services that the state isn't able to. However, we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have the support from the state. So.
And I think just adding to that, working together, we're building new structures of communication and cooperation. And I also think that just being able to have more eyes on a family or a juvenile, we can get different perspectives. We can come together to, hold that youth accountable.
I would agree. I think that it's a great opportunity for us to come together and have more eyes and more hearts supporting the families that come through our offices.
And I think Two, just in listening, particularly about Ms. Smith's experience at the graduation, is that acknowledgement of our gifts and our strengths in our communities and how those can uplift our youth and be preventative and intervention for them when they are either in contact with the juvenile justice system or prior to that contact. So just really having that acknowledgement that the strengths and the answers exist within our communities and having those elevated to a state level, so there's that understanding and that appreciation. I know a lot of times we talk about evidence-based, but the evidence for a lot of Indigenous communities is in our histories, and we know that. And so having that acknowledgement is super helpful, and I think beneficial to us as practitioners, but also the youth, because they're benefiting from that knowledge that they're getting in working in these systems.
And just to follow up briefly, with Alisha and Amber, you guys talked a little bit about the cultural component of your youth programming. Can you elaborate more in terms of how that initiative started and what forms of collaboration are necessary in order to get that cultural component started as opposed to other parts of your programming?
Absolutely. The culture part of it is within our program. So we will set our youth up with like beading classes and things like that. We will also get them connected with some of our other Choctaw programs, such as Chat, which they have mentored youth, but they also bring a culture aspect into that. We will get them set up with youth culture camps and things like that as well.
The Youth Advisory Board?
Yes. But we definitely, as far as a collaboration with that, we communicate with Kheri and let her know these are all things that we're going to be having our youth participate in. You want to add to that?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
And I wanted to take just a brief second to note that one of the things I have heard numerous times from tribal youth is they hadn't experienced their culture like this before, and they're very thankful to have that.
That's great. Thank you for your guys' responses. Debra or Janelle, do you have any examples of collaboration which have maybe helped overcome obstacles in your guys' efforts?
I know for me, working and having the district liaisons and myself being able to communicate with the network of other state agency tribal liaisons has been really beneficial. It's been incredibly helpful, substantially helpful being a part of the Tribal Juvenile Justice Committee, because again, I go back to relationship building. It's just key, the connections, the contact, the people to be able to contact or connect to when we have a tribal youth and family that needs support and help, and being able to reach out to the tribe and work together to best serve that youth and family is just imperative. And I think the connections that we've established and relationship building is just taking us into greater steps and again, meeting those needs as best we can.
I agree with Janelle. We meet on a quarterly basis right now. In fact, our next meeting is next week. So I think having those regular communications with each other, just to try to learn from each other. And then I think, more recently, I've needed to pick up the phone and, talk with OJA more than ever. So I think, without that kind of foundation, it may be a little bit intimidating, to make those contacts. But now, I think that we're just learning from each other right now, and just building on our operations internally, but then also communicating with the other tribes, because we also have Native youth from other tribal nations that are within our reservation now.
Thank you. And I think we've got some questions from our participants, specifically one geared towards Choctaw.
Thank you, Jacob. I see a question about the House bill that initiated the data that you're getting from the state. And I think you were initially referencing the Oklahoma State Notification Statute, which provides a notification for youth who come into contact with the Oklahoma State juvenile offices. There's a notification that has been sent to the tribal representative for that if the youth indicates that they're of tribal descent or enrolled in a tribe. So Janelle, I'm going to bring up that, we can go ahead and I'll bring up the statute. You can mention a little bit more about that.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is the statute we've been referring to that went into law. And so the Juvenile Bureau, to explain this a little bit, the Office of Juvenile Affairs is a statewide agency, of course, that serves all 77 counties of the state. But in the metro, the larger counties, we have four larger counties, and we have juvenile bureaus. And those juvenile bureaus handle everything from intake through probation. And so if a youth comes into our custody, then OJA is given that case. So that's why you see the juvenile bureau in here. So if the intake staff determines that a youth has American Indian lineages or ancestry, then we're going to notify the primary tribe or nation of membership or citizenship, and we do that within 3 judicial days. So it was paramount that we developed that directory, right? Because we didn't know who we were going to be contacting, right? So we that's where that relationship building really came in, and talking to the tribes about, okay, here's the law that's gone into effect, and going through that and moving through that and understanding that together and what that means and how that can better serve tribal youth and families, and again, having that connection with that person at the tribe. So I don't know if Debra wants to add anything to that, but that is the law presently.
I think you explained it very well, Janelle.
I want to add to the confidential piece. Any information or records related to taking the child in custody shall be confidential. So we're sending these notifications out, and I know we've had discussions about that. I know some of the tribes have wanted. We developed a form with certain information on that form to notify the tribes, the youth's name, of course, and some other demographic information, and why we're sending the form and what the notification law is. And I know we've had some contacts say, well, can I have some more information about what happened? Because the spirit of the law, of course, is to get those culturally relevant services or connection to that youth and family. And so we're still kind of working through that. We do have a process for release of information, of course, if that's needed. But I think there's some more work there we can look through together to address confidentiality.
Thank you. And I think that's a good lead into our not final question, not final comments quite yet, but the challenges. So we've talked a lot about how great collaboration has been, but are there any challenges that our panelists would want to note to getting those collaborations started? And I'm going to go to Bridget first, since we've had a lot of Oklahoma conversation.
Thank you. One of my first challenges that I experienced was I needed to learn to be patient. I tend to be a planner, and I like to know when and where I'm going to be places, and then I go on and I plan a full day of site visits. I have since learned that with my work with Native American tribes, that visits should and do take time, and that I need to be patient to hear the stories, to hear what's going on, and to truly show a vested interest. And so now I no longer go in looking to say, okay, I have 15 minutes, let's get through this, but we have a day to share together. I will give you as much time as you ask of me. And it's not that I'm coming to you to say, I need you to check these boxes and move forward. It's share with me what's going on, and I will share how I can help in any way. And so just that collaborative, open relationships has really helped my need to be patient and while still getting my work done, but realizing I'm there to learn. So that was something I really needed to work on, was my patience.
Thanks,
Thank
Bridget.
you, Bridget.
I have a quick question, sorry, and for Debra. I know you talked a little bit about anticipating the effects of the McGirt decision in terms of how your office is going to handle potentially an influx of cases. How do you, what obstacles are you anticipating in terms of that change? And I know Judge Blake mentioned in the Q&A about intertribal collaboration, and so did you. Could you speak on the differences between collaboration between states and tribes from your experience?
Sure. I think, one of the things more immediate is probably just the staffing that we will need to have. Right now, we have one probation officer is soon to be hiring another probation officer, also including the hiring of a new prosecutor to help with the caseload. I think that's one of the things too. We have been working with OJA and trying to identify the Native youth who are within our 13 counties, the Chickasaw Nation Reservation. So, and they came from, a number of different tribes, not only in Oklahoma, but other, tribes outside of the state. So I think that's a very, intriguing idea in terms of an MOU. We were just talking about that yesterday on the Indian Child Welfare side, but I think it would be important also, to have those kind of formal agreements, especially if there are maybe certain services that we're not aware of, that maybe Chickasaw Nation may not be providing, that maybe the tribe of that youth, it might be available to them as a tribal member. So I think that would be something we could definitely explore and talk with other tribal nations. So I just think, that right now it's just trying to get the different partners, like I said, the different agencies acquainted with, the way it looks now in terms of jurisdiction. Because right now, I think people are still trying to understand what this all means. And so I'm really intrigued by the idea of having a MOU with other tribal nations when it comes to, this area.
Thank you, Debra. Before we're getting close to the end of our session, so I just wanted to acknowledge and tell everyone thank you for everything that's been shared today, and wanted to note what Bridget shared about taking time and spending a day to hear what's needed instead of trying to just get through, the checklist of what needs to be accomplished. And for many of the communities that I'm seeing that are developing the juvenile healing to wellness courts or tribal youth program initiatives that do require that collaboration and the partnership to really move that youth into the programmatic services, it is so important for those partners to have that time. And it is a major commitment to start those meetings and ensure that there's enough time to communicate and really work through the program itself. And so that is a part of the strategic planning efforts that the TYRC contributes to in the work with our OJJDP tribal grantees. And I've just really seen some great things taking place in many communities. We know that there are still challenges for some communities in getting those partnerships started. And so I would invite you to outreach to TYRC. We can connect you with the panelists if you're interested in learning more about how they're working with each other and how those partnerships exist and some of the logistics behind it. If there's memorandum of understanding, there's other communities that are not a part of this panel today that have been working on MOU and other agreements to ensure that youth can move into their program services. So even where we don't have these notification statutes or these other requirements, there are ways to support getting those youth moved into these prevention initiatives. And so very happy to connect with you and support any of the other questions that you might have, because I know we can't address all of that today. So I know that we have a couple more questions in the chat box. I don't know how much time we have to answer all of those, but Kara had asked if there could be a little bit more elaboration on how the Oklahoma Working Group got started, and that might be a question for Debra.
Yes, the Intertribal Council actually in 2000 had created the Juvenile Justice Task Force. It looks a little bit different today than it did back in 2000, but the idea was that the council wanted the task force to look at the needs of tribal youth who are at risk or delinquent, and so now it hasn't. It's like I said, it's changed a little bit different focus in terms of now that we have programs, ongoing. So it moved from kind of like a concept to actual. Now that we have programs, how can we work collaboratively and address Native youth in juvenile justice settings. So we have now formalized an actual committee within the Intertribal Council of the 5 tribes, and we continue to meet regularly and have our meetings. So I think it has started somewhat small, but it has grown to, and we've been part of a continuing, I guess, move forward with being on panels such as this, learning from each other, and then learning from others, outside of Oklahoma.
Thank you, Debra. And I've had the opportunity to attend a few of those meetings, and there's always really great participation. And I know we've even had other tribes that want to come and see what's occurring and find out if there's new conversations happening between that working group and the state. So I know that it's a really great place to stay connected and continue conversations on how we can support the youth in our communities.
And overall, I think one question that would benefit our participants is, and this is a question for everyone, every panelist, and what's your current hope for the youth in your community? And how do you view collaboration as a vessel to your community achieving your hope in the future? And I guess I'll ask Tasha that question.
Sure. I think the overarching hope for myself and of course the Tribal Youth Resource Center is just envisioning a future where our children are strengthened with Indigenous culture and lifeways, and that goes back to our mission here at the TYRC. So in whatever capacity we as individuals and a collective team and allies can work together toward that, I think that's the vision.
Any advice for other communities, Tasha?
I think, I would be kind of presumptuous if I gave advice to other communities. I think communities know what they need. The only advice I would give as a TA center is that please utilize us. Let us help you to figure that out and navigate what works best for your community. That's what we're here for, whether you're a grantee or non-grantee. We would love to help you create whatever positive vision you have for your community and help you heal your community.
I don't have any advice, but I would just say reach out to those partners, those potential partners. I mean, you see what you have to offer each other to work together, because you all have the same common goal of serving the youth in your community.
And I would add to show up for everything that you can be a part of, for both planning, for support for the tribe, and then for anything you can for the youth as well.
I would add at a state level that juvenile justice services for tribal youth isn't limited to reservations, that you need to remember that these youth are being served throughout the state, and invite tribes to the table when discussing issues and reform strategies for the remaining youth in the state, that we need to remember to invite everyone to the table, and that these youth are being served on and off of reservations.
And I agree with all the different visions that were expressed. I think, you know, in terms of our office, I think prosecution is kind of a last resort. What we want to do is just strengthen, just like what Tasha mentioned, strengthen our Native youth wherever, you know, their tribal nations, wherever they represent. So I think that collaborating with each other, with other agencies, other partners, learning from each other, I think is what we need to do well for these for Native youth.
I just want to add that I think hope is a key word here, that collectively we're working together to strengthen tribal youth and families and provide hope, hope for a great future. And these partnerships, this collaboration is certainly incredibly important in those efforts.
Thank you. So we'll say thank you to all of our panelists. And again, we know there's questions that came up today. We'll do some follow-up individually with our panelists and make sure that if you asked a question, we'll respond to you after this session. But thank you again for attending, and thank you again for all of the work that's occurring throughout Oklahoma and in South Dakota. We appreciate your efforts and your commitment to serving tribal youth.
Yes, thank you for everyone attending session C1. Panel Tribal State Relations to Support Juvenile Justice Improvements. As a reminder, there is a link for a workshop session and evaluation in the chat box. Please click on this link now and take a moment to complete your survey. Your survey will guide us in the future to better develop and create resources for you and your home communities. There is also a sign that links to the session evaluations in the main lobby room. So please look for that sign in case you weren't able to fill out an evaluation for other sessions. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. If you've been unable to join a session that you are interested in, a recording will be posted on this platform and will remain until April 30th. After that time, you may find the recordings and all the conference sessions on the Tribal Youth Resource website, www.tribalyouth.org. Thank you, everyone.